Reagan, I think you have some comments for us. And in addition to our agenda, correct?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. First, happy 29th to Councilman Pate. That's good to know. Yes, I had sent all of you an email earlier today. I am requesting an item 4E be added to the agenda, and if you're in your civic clerk version of your packet, you'll see that I've listed it there. This is as a result of some inquiries that came from the Treasurer's Office because we are before the Local Government Commission for approval of an installment financing contract. They had just a couple of questions coming out of our audited financials. Tess Brubaker-Spees, our finance director, has written up responses to those. I've provided you copies of those responses. And as part of the process, they simply ask for council approval of the responses so that we can send those off to them tomorrow morning. So as an item 4E, I would ask for a motion. You have the motion in front of you as part of a memo that will in fact approve those responses to the Treasurer's Office. Regarding your agenda today, there are 3 items, including the 4E I just requested, that are related to the Parkway financing contract or the installment financing contract for the Parkway. I'll go into greater detail on that as part of the public hearing. I do know that Mr. Mitch Brugulio with Davenport Financial is on his way here. If there are questions that should come up that maybe I don't have an immediate response to, he will be present. He, again, is with Davenport Financial and has been working with the town since we first began the Parkway reimbursement process back in 2022. So items 3A, 4C, and 4E are all sort of related with today's meeting. I sent all of you an email last week to draw to your attention some applications that were in your Dropbox for various vacant HDC and BPAC appointments. I believe that BJ will probably address those during his planning update also, but would just simply remind you that if council is interested in making any of those appointments at the May meeting, please let us know at the end of this meeting, and we'll get that on the agenda. And then the final comment or item I'd like to just give you a brief update on, and BJ, if you can pull up some of those pictures. We are having a small problem relative to the Environmental Services Division and some landscape companies. We've had some pictures forwarded to us of some dumping, illicit dumping that's been taking place on the backside of the Campbell House. Some of these pictures are out of West Southern Pines and homes that don't even have garbage accounts or that are currently vacant. We are aware of some landscape companies where individuals are emptying their trailers in their front yard and then waiting for the town to come by and pick up the large amounts of stuff and pay the county to dump it. This will be, in all likelihood, a growing problem as the county continues to increase its yard waste tipping fee from $35 to $40 a ton in the coming year. So because we will have in the future some updates before you relative to the code that are necessary as a result of the changes that will take place in January with the new opt-in recycling and those types of things, we also wish to address some of the illicit dumping issues that particular picture the code already takes care of, and that one is being dealt with. But some of the others that were there, particularly the very long block, there's one example, and this is actually an entire block in West Southern Pines where somebody's just coming along and emptying their trailers. So when that code comes before you, I just wanted you to have some visuals of what we're dealing with out on the streets. This particular one, what this results in is poor Lisa Webb has to start sending letters to the property owners of these. And again, they're vacant properties. So oftentimes it's a matter of tracking them down. They're out of state, telling them that they've got to then get this cleaned up, $50 a day fine. It's an awful lot of headache, to be perfectly honest. So that's just a visual again, so that when it comes back later on and I'm pointing out that we maybe tied some things into nuisance and fines, it's because of this type of activity that's taking place.
Even if it had a account, that massive tree chopped up wasn't.
Yeah, that one,
Well,
that was a picture that Corey included, but we're already taking care of. That's not acceptable today. Actually, none of the other stuff is acceptable either, but we want to put some teeth behind it. Again, there's other jurisdictions where if a landscaper, if a private landscaper comes in and mows your yard, they are expected to carry it off. The municipality will not pick it up. We're not going that route. However, it is an expectation that the landscaper doesn't pull up and, in addition to your handful of grass clippings or pine cones, dump stuff that they brought in from another jurisdiction. That stuff does need to be taken to Moore County and handled by the professional landscaper.
So you think these were just like cleaned up from area houses and then dumped there, or brought in from
Brought in.
remotely from
And
somewhere else?
it could,
They
I mean,
used it as a dump.
from from somewhere other than the lot that it's in
Right,
front of. It
right.
could have been something in the neighborhood. It could have been something from Pine Bluff. Not to
so-
pick on them, just.
All of the above, yeah.
Nothing in the ordinances now from a fining perspective to deal with it.
We are looking at that because it could be that we could look at some nuisance and different things. What in the ordinances are very good at dealing with the property
Right,
where it gets dumped. It's dealing with the individual that does the illicit dumping.
Right.
Whether or not it can be treated as, for instance, the individual that throws a fast food bag out the window, that's something that need to work with the law director on. And that's one that I know from past experience has always been a challenge to get, for obvious reasons, the DA's office even to necessarily deal with. There's much bigger things going on. But this simply can't be left to happen. It's a strain on our crews. It's a strain on the budget and what everybody has to pay for these services. And inevitably, if you were not an individual that said go ahead and dump it there, you get stuck with it, and you get the nasty letter from Lisa Webb too. So
was that not happening when we outsourced it?
well,
Or are we
if
just
it
more attentive
was,
to it?
the private company wasn't saying much about it, or they wouldn't necessarily have known there was an account there or not an account.
Gotcha.
So.
Question, it was happening. It's a problem right there at the back of the Campbell House. That's been that's been an ongoing issue, and
So again, the friendly shot over the bow for the benefit of the reporter in the room that may want to just write up that we discussed this is if you own a landscaping company, the expectation is you're going to take your materials to the Moore County landfill and not dump them either in front of your house or somebody else's house for the town to pick it up.
Is there a fee for landscapers to dump? It's not.
sorry?
If you go to the Moore County,
I believe, I'll verify that, I believe there is, because I believe they have a minimum charge. If you don't have a ton of material, they have like a $5 minimum charge or something like that. So with that, I will go ahead and turn the agenda back over to you, Mayor.
okay, I need a motion to adopt the agenda with the addition of item 4E.
so moved.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, legislative public hearing. Is this where we would like to have, who's going to present?
I am.
Okay, perfect. Reagan?
Thank you, Mayor. First, let me begin by welcoming Mitch Brugulio with Davenport Financial. Glad you made it through the construction traffic and were able to join us, Mitch. If you have any questions along the way, I am here, and as is Mitch, and hopefully we can provide you answer. So this is simply the memo that's in your packet, making a final recommendation. I'll go through a little slideshow here, if BJ can advance. Bingo. So how we got here today, back in June of 2022, the town council entered into a reimbursement agreement with Midland Atlantic. Under that agreement, Midland Atlantic agreed to follow general statute and go to public bid on the creation of what is now the Carolina Parkway, running from Morganton Road to US 15501. Most of you are familiar with it, have driven it, may have already visited the Open Dick's Sporting Goods or Golf Galaxy there. Under the reimbursement agreement, the town agreed that they would reimburse up to a maximum of $6.8 million to Midland Atlantic for the creation of that parkway. This was to ensure that the parkway would run all the way from 15501 to Morganton and not just dead end awaiting the next development to come along and add on to it. The project itself will be well over a $9 million project once it is constructed, so it is not a 100% reimbursement. We did, however, agree to a maximum cap as part of the reimbursement. Now that it has been built and will be before the council in either May or June for public dedication, we are going through the process of acquiring an installment financing contract to pay the $6.8 million, which, as council is aware, will be paid off over a 20-year period, all principal and interest covered by a municipal service district. Municipal service district allows the town council to place a separate tax, a per 100 number of pennies, that will be only to those businesses that lie adjacent to the parkway and benefit directly from the existence of the parkway. That tax has been in place for a couple of budget cycles now, so we have set some money aside toward the first P&I payment that will come along. And again, what we are here today for is to hold the mandatory public hearing on the acceptance of that financing contract prior to a local government commission meeting in May, where we would assume and expect that the local government commission will provide the town authority to enter into that contract. So if you could go to next slide, BJ. Maybe the next slide. So a request for proposal, while he's pulling that up, and it is in your packet, was let by Davenport. It was sent directly to some 50 lending institutions. We did receive responses from 4 institutions: Capital One Public Funding, JP Morgan, Truist, and Webster Bank. The amount let was for $7.1 million, as was discussed at the last meeting. The reimbursement agreement is for 6.8. The 7.1 allows for all of the bank fees, financing fees, and various work of both Davenport Financial and Mary Nash Rusher, who's with the attorney group that has helped with the reimbursement agreement from the beginning. And all of those are, in fact, reimbursable under the municipal service district. So the reason to include it in the loan is to ensure that those properties that will eventually, again, benefit directly from the roadway will, in fact, ultimately pay for all of those services that go into the creation of the installment finance contract. We requested 15 and 20-year terms. Also looked for the possibility of early payoff or refinancing, essentially, if future council should decide to do so. As we are aware, the loan realm has changed quite a bit since 2022, and interest rates are a little bit higher than when we first started all of this, but we were successful in getting a decent interest rate on this. Again, those 4 came back. A very key element of this is that 2 of them, being Truist and also JP Morgan, offered loans that would allow for the underlying parkway to be the collateral. That was of great benefit. You may recall at times in the past we talked about the possibility of having to put up potentially vehicles like large fire trucks and or even buildings as collateral against the possibility of the town not paying a loan back in the future, which is not the plan, nor can I imagine it ever occurring. However, with 2 of the banks saying that the parkway and the town's finances were more than adequate, very quickly in working with Davenport Financial, we determined that we wanted to take a closer look at those 2 of the 4 offerings because it simplifies and makes this far more straightforward. The next item that came into play was the 15 and 20-year term, and only Truist was willing to write a 20-year term on this. The JP Morgan also had an additional item of the interest rate that was put into the RFP They were not willing to lock down, and in fact would not lock down until so many days before actual closing on the loan. So in speaking with both legal and financial counsel, in addition to Tess and I being involved in those conversations, the recommendation is that the town council accept the terms of the Truist commercial equity offering at 20 years. They offered both a thou shall never pay early, thou shall pay after 7 years without penalty, or thou can pay after 10 years without penalty. Our recommendation is the 7-year term. Again, just in the event that a future council would like to be able to refinance that for whatever reason. It could be as simple as offering a lower interest rate and maybe thus lower tax rate to that area. It could also be that some other addition is wished to be added to the parkway or that area that makes a refinancing and some additional money make a lot of sense. Any number of things could occur that a future town council would want to go back and reopen this and address it. So the 7-year term would seem to be the best option, particularly given the relatively small I'll call it discount by going to 10 years or going to thou shall never pay off early. If you could go to the next slide, BJ. Thank you. Again, here's the debt service comparison on the 7 and 10-year options. You see the change in going to a 10-year option drops the rate from a 4.85 to a 4.69. I had sent all of you also separately because it was an interactive worksheet and not something I wanted to be playing around with up on this screen necessarily, but I had sent all of you kind of an amortization schedule and showing that even with what is on the ground out there today, and we have every reason to believe more is going on the ground, but what is on the ground out there today, the loan as it is currently put together at either the 7 or 10-year option can be paid off well within our maximum allowance for that MSD tax rate. And in fact, at a tax rate currently of about 64, 65 pennies over the next 5 years following the current budget cycle, where the recommendation will be to stick with the 60-cent tax rate. So with that, if you want to go to the next slide, BJ.
So I'm interested in why, tell me the advantage of the 20-year over the 15-year. What's your thinking?
Essentially on the 15-year on the Truist doesn't change the interest rate all that terribly much. It does allow for greater flexibility in setting of that tax rate, in that you only have to go to 60 or 65 pennies. The 15 years obviously starts to push that together a little bit more. We'll put council in a position potentially in future years, again, depending on the development that is out there, of having to set quite a bit higher tax rate within the MSD in order to generate the principal and interest payments. And the other thing that it does is it provides greater opportunity for any development that ultimately benefits from the existence of that parkway actually paying toward its payoff. If you front load all of this, it's the people on the ground first that are going to pay everything off, and those that are the last in won't have as much skin in the game, for lack of a better term.
But we're going to keep charging it even after this is paid off.
Well, that's obviously up to a future council and a future manager that will be presenting budgets 20 years from now.
Well, since Bill's
But,
only
but
29.
that is a legal option at this time in the state of North Carolina, yes.
To maintain that road, yeah, would be nice.
Go ahead.
So, the monies collected it functions somewhat like an enterprise fund?
Somewhat like an enterprise
Yeah.
fund. It's not user fees, obviously, but it goes into its own account. It is a separate set of books. The money that Tess has collected to date is sitting in that account. It can only be spent on items within the lands that were made part of the MSD. It is entirely possible, and in fact, there's some conversation taking place right now around a singular parcel that somebody may be added to this MSD in the future. They may request to be added. In that instance, the tax rate would simply go against any additional parcels or development that gets added to it. But it is its own budget unto itself. It's not the water and sewer budget, it's not the general fund budget, it is the municipal service district.
Okay, so the municipal service district now is just everything along Morganton, Carolina Parkway. Everything in Morganton Park, I guess.
Everything in Morganton Park South along the Carolina Parkway. And in fact, ultimately, there will be parcels that may not be, I'll use the term immediately adjacent, i.e. they may not have an ingress egress directly off of the parkway. But if you think about the Morganton Park CDP, it involves, for instance, a large tract of land directly adjacent to Morganton Road. That land is likely to get parceled off into 3 or 4 separate businesses, but all of that land is part of the parkway because the access to those businesses would be, in this instance, by way of an extension of Old Morganton Road out to the parkway. So it is still benefiting directly from the existence of the parkway. Same thing with the BJ's Wholesale Club. That land sits immediately adjacent to the parkway. The ingress egress will actually be off of an extension of Southern Road running between Outback and et cetera. Thank you, BJ, for the map there. So everything in color there is, regardless of how it gets subdivided or where its driveway may access, is part of the MSD at this point in time.
So the new section where the wholesaler is going retail 11.
Yep, right
That's
there.
also a part of it.
That
That
is
section
correct.
of road down to Southern Road is also a part of it.
Yes.
And so it's basically the right of way to right of way. Like
You're talking about the parkway as the right of way to it? Yes.
where the money can be utilized.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
And
If I may, just a quick, just so a possible misunderstanding doesn't go by there. Currently, there's no money in it for the construction of Southern or Old Morganton, correct, Reagan?
That is correct.
Okay.
there's no one what?
That,
No money in it right now for assisting with the construction of the Southern Road connection, which this is Coles right here. Southern Road comes up through, it's going to come right through here. You'll remember the plan we saw where there was a Starbucks right here, BJ's Wholesale was right here, and this road needs to be constructed. This is where the roundabout is right now.
Yeah.
And don't make me get out drone footage because, man, I tell you what.
Yeah, I won't.
No. And then this road up here is off in the distance in the future. There's nothing, you haven't seen anything right now under PDP or anything like that.
and those are, Southern Road, for instance, will be made part of the BJ's
It is
improvement.
being built
And
with
the
that.
town just doesn't have any involvement in reimbursing or financing for that. Because again, the
I gotcha.
6.8 is more than spent already on the parkway itself.
Within future repairs, can we?
But
we-
because, I was going to say, because Southern and some of these other roads are within the boundaries of the MSD, if a future council were to decide that a repaving or a widening or a decel lane or whatever you can imagine, they could go back and utilize the MSD to fund something along those lines, because it's within the boundaries, exactly.
Even construction of the Patriot to Carolina Parkway. At the top.
Well, Old Morganton, yes.
Yes. So construction of connecting that road could be a part of it as well.
Theoretically, yes,
Yes, theoretically. Right.
yes.
So,
That has not been requested, nor has there been an approval of
Right.
a particular PDP through there or anything, but that does fall within the MSD.
shared once the data on how long a road typically lasts before we repave. What's the lifetime of a road?
Give or take, and there's a lot of factors with that, obviously. A commercial road of this nature, particularly with the traffic that we anticipate it carrying, will probably require some level of repaving at about 15 years, give or take.
So talk me out of thinking that the 15-year loan is a good idea based on that.
Well, again, the 20-year loan.
Or maybe that's a
just
question for
covers the
today.
initial reimbursement agreement. Even
Right.
at 15 years, there's nothing to say a council couldn't decide to repave and take money out of the MSD in order to do that. And in fact, given the 15-year give or take window, it's actually better at 20 years because you'll be there'll be a decision point in there somewhere prior to the end of the P&I running out. versus if you're sitting in year 14 talking about, well, we're going to have this paid off this budget year,
And a big expense.
and it doesn't really need repaved yet, what should we do? It kind of encompasses it then within the,
Okay.
And it looks like you have about north of $4 million in cumulative surplus in 15 years, according to the preliminary cash flow.
again, that's, yeah, with a lot of estimates and the preliminary cash flow. And
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was $9 million to build that road, and so I don't know what it would cost to resurface it, but
and what it'll cost in 15 years. And,
Yeah.
Who knows? Is it my, is it a question for you, or is it a question for our esteemed guest? As far as why, is it just it's the interest rate being written in stone right now as to why we're leaning toward Truist rather than JP Morgan, which
Well,
cites a lower?
It's a
although-
couple of things. It's one, the surety of the interest rate. Two, they're the only ones that offer 20 years. So looking at the 20 years, I will, particularly since he took the time to drive all the way over here, Mitch, would you like to expand on that in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, sure, I'm happy to. Is it okay if I?
That'd be great. I would love to hear about that.
Your microphone on.
And also whether or not there's the option of returning to Chase and asking if there might be a 20-year option, or is that just is that not within reason to ask that question?
Yeah, so JP Morgan, they have a hard cap on 15 years. So I have not seen a 20-year proposal from them certainly not one that has a fixed rate for the full term.
Ever, right?
Recently.
Historically? Okay,
Recently,
okay.
yes, ma'am. So I mean, obviously happy to ask, but I don't suspect that would be an option for them. Related to Truist, we're talking about the 7-year option is the recommended option. The 15-year rate is a 474, whereas the 20-year rate is a 485. So like Reagan said, there's not a lot of interest rate savings there to go from 15 to 20, and you can prepay the loan after 7 years. So the 20-year term is giving you slightly lower payments on the front end, allowing you to either keep a lower MST tax rate or hold it the same and build up additional surplus. And you have the ability to pay it off early. So if you choose to set an MSD tax rate at the level that would be required to cover a 15-year term, but keep that 20-year term for flexibility, you would have the ability to potentially, depending upon how the development comes compared to estimates, have enough funding to pay it off at the 15-year level, or consider repaving the road at that time from the surplus or other items. And I think that was part of the discussion about the 7-year term. It just gives you ultimate flexibility. If additional development comes over and above what's projected, and you collect significant additional dollars, there's nothing to say that you couldn't pay the loan off in 8, 9, 10 years if you were able to build up that level of funding. So I think the idea was, particularly given that this is tied to the MSD and that the MSD tax rate is paying for this debt service, maintain ultimate flexibility with very minimal, I don't want to minimize any additional cost, but minimal additional interest rate, about 11 basis points, 0.11% additional interest rate cost. You have the flexibility of lower payments in a 20-year term if you want it, or you could choose to prepay it early and achieve the same thing as you could for a 15-year term.
I have a question that might be crazy, but in this structure, if you did pay it off early, we're collecting the revenue through the MSD to pay off the debt service. If you paid it off early and prepaid and shortened your interest, could those savings, would they have to stay, you couldn't use those? I guess what I'm saying is you're taxing these properties to cover this debt service. For example, self-financed. If you paid it off early, you would be somewhat self-financing it if you didn't have the principal and interest repaid by the properties, is there a way that the town in this scenario, if it's self-financed, would earn that interest in general revenue?
If, as opposed to borrowing through a
Yes.
lender, if the town had the funds
Yes, or
on
prepaid.
hand, or you
Yeah.
have funding now or in the future
Yes.
and choose to essentially refinance this installment financing with and enter into an interfund loan of some sort with the town and set an interest rate, perhaps. We're getting into some dangerous accounting terms there, so I might have to defer. I'm not a CPA, but I think in the grand scheme of things, essentially what you would be doing there as a town is investing your town general fund or whatever dollars into a municipal loan, right, at an interest rate to gain interest.
The town would become truist.
Right. And presumably, that would only benefit the MSD if there was a lower interest rate tied to that than what they have currently. And you all as a town, under, Statute 159, have the ability to invest in other securities like U.S. Treasury bonds, which are a taxable rate, which theory in most environments should give you a better interest rate than a tax exempt investment, which is what this is. So, I think it's something that could be explored. We have to explore it from, accounting angle and legal angle, but then just kind of stepping back from it, I feel like you would also have other options to consider from the investment side than purchasing a municipal tax exempt loan. Essentially, entering into a municipal tax exempt loan is what you would be doing. You could consider purchasing, a U.S. government-backed treasury bond at a taxable rate, which in theory should give you a better rate of return than a tax exempt municipal loan.
Okay.
So probably accomplish something similar to what you're talking about, creating an interest stream, but perhaps give you a better rate of return at the same time.
I guess my question, or not question, comment from a conceptual standpoint. I feel like I like the flexibility. 20 years gives us a long time. And I think of this thing as like a faucet. Like we set that rate number and it determines how much flows or how little flows. And so through the 20 years, we can kind of see, what's the value of the property this year? How much is it? How much is that rate going to produce? And if we need to turn it higher, we can. Or if we need to turn it lower, we can. And we get to do that every year, right?
That's correct.
It's a yearly decision what that rate is.
You adopt an MSD tax rate just at the same meeting, at part of the same budget that you adopt the annual budget in June.
Yeah, then it appears if for that 20 years, we have utmost flexibility that it should work out just fine.
I want to maintain the flexibility of a 20-year with a 7-year call. I think that provides us the best options to do what's right for the town.
So is there any point in approaching Chase and asking if they'll consider a 20-year? Or you think that would be a waste of your time and energy?
I'm happy to reach out, but we asked for 20-year terms on the front end, and we did follow up with them and had several conversations.
Okay.
So nothing's a waste of my time. We work for you all, and we take our direction from you, so we're happy to do whatever you'd like. But I do not anticipate that to be an option, just based upon the number of these types of transactions we've done over the recent months and years.
We also have the ability to lock in the rate from Truist if we accept it this evening, which I believe interest rates just went up, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it would be in our best interest to look into making a decision tonight, if everyone's comfortable doing that.
Sorry, can I just add one more thing that I meant to mention that may or may not be helpful to you? But regarding the slide that's on the screen and the development, and I think Reagan, Mr. Parsons, you would run another scenario with just the existing land value,
That's right.
And I think we're all very positive on this development and Southern Pines and the area in general in terms of the growth and valuation that's expected to come. Don't expect anything different than that, but 7, 10, 15, 20 years is a long time. You never know what's going to happen. We're assuming that the existing value is going to at least stay the same, and we are going to add new value. Never know what's going to happen in the future, just like we saw, basically a doubling of the value with this revaluation. Don't know what's going to happen in the future, and with future revaluations, you could see the opposite. Don't expect it to happen based upon what we know, but there's nothing to say that that could not happen in the future. So the 20-year term just gives you more time, more flexibility to handle any sort of downside scenario which could occur as well. And I fall into the trap knowing the situation you all are in of thinking all like positives, but I'd be remiss in my duty if I didn't mention the flip side, the downside as well. And that's kind of the other piece where this 20-year term gives you some flexibility to deal with an unexpected downside scenario.
Go for it.
Mine's kind of off top. Your last question on this.
Well, my instinct is that I would love to hear from Tess and ask her what questions she wished we had asked.
I have a, sorry. I was just going to ask a question following her question on the JP Morgan thing. So it says the rate may be locked within 45 days of closing. We don't know what that rate is today, right? Is it still 3.998 or?
I do not believe it is still 3.98.
Okay.
We can call and get an update on that, but just given what we've seen in interest rates since we accepted proposals, I would not have expected it. I would not expect it to go down from where it is today.
And so from a timing perspective, between the number of days of closing, when is closing? And say we adopt one of these tonight. Does it say that? I'm sorry.
June, yeah. So Truist has a closing deadline by June 11th.
Okay, on Chase.
So we could lock their rate within
determined.
45 days of closing. So we're close to borderline being able to lock in a rate with them. And
Days at least to close that loan as well.
we have to lock it in within 45 days. And if you kind of just big picture.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Parsons, if you want.
Well, no, I was going to say along those lines, this kind of outlines the schedule moving forward. As he said, June 11th was the Truist deadline. I know in speaking with Midland Atlantic, they anticipate requesting us to go out and do inspections and all of that in early May on the Parkway. And of course, the LGC meeting that we've got the application before also occurs in May. It is entirely possible that, again, June 11th is a deadline. It likely occurs before then. It is entirely possible we would have the dedication of the Parkway on the agenda for the May work session and potentially be closing that loan before the end of the month in May. The reimbursement agreement itself talks about a July 1 deadline. So it'll be somewhere between end of May, end of June. Truist kind of locks us in as June 11th on the closing, which works just fine. But relative to when, if we were to go to a different financial institution, that deadline would move somewhere within that range. It wouldn't be any later than June 30th. It could be as early as end of May.
Yeah. What I was getting at was that, if JP Morgan is 3.98, whenever this was assembled, it is somewhere north of maybe most likely 3.98 today, which makes that delta even less than what it shows here.
Going to be locked in at 3.98.
Yeah.
And
Right.
be able to stretch out far enough.
Right. Okay. That's all.
Here's my question. I think I alluded to it at budget retreat. We're going to do the punch list or whatever they're going to call it in May. Are we able to, I don't want to hand this money over to them if there's anything outstanding. Can we just do an escrow? because that's irrespective of this. This loan is with Truist, and we could do a private agreement with Atlantic and say, you're still not getting the 6 million. Yeah, we have it, but
I'll
you need
defer to Mac to correct me, but yes, that's already in the back of my
Okay.
mind.
Perfect. Thank you.
And yes, there will be a warranty.
The 7-year call option also gives us the ability to refinance at that point. If
Yeah.
interest rates fell, we could
Yes, ma'am.
look at that option.
If interest rates go down, or you choose to pay off the loan early from excess surplus, you have the ability to do either after the 7-year mark.
Okay. All right. Thank
And
you.
I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you can do either at any time. It's just that there's a penalty if you don't wait 7
Yeah,
years.
so during the first 7 years, we have what's called a make whole call provision, which essentially says that you can pay it off if you need to pay it off for any reason. We just don't know what that prepayment penalty will be. At the time we choose to pay it off within the first 7 years, Truist would look at what their reinvestment rate on that money would be if we paid it off and gave it back to them. And there's a calculation that says what's the difference between what we would have paid versus what they can reinvest it at. And whatever the difference is,
Essentially making sure that we don't make money or
We have
do
to-
better off
yeah,
financially by doing it earlier. Yeah.
you got it, you
Okay.
got it.
Yeah, I'm good with 7 years.
You're right.
Okay, we're not going to play around with,
We can hold money
yeah.
and give it to them at 7.
Yes.
We have, so yes.
So the flexibility is what people are, is the advantage to Truist in that it's a 7-year call rather than a 10-year call, and it's also a 20-year loan rather than a 15, is that? does
Yes,
that
ma'am.
Sum it up. Okay, Tess, your thoughts? What questions should we have asked?
I don't have any additional questions. I mean, the only thing that we have been bouncing around is the interest rates. That's the only variable in all of this. And as you indicated, that they're going up, and we thought they might go down, and that's not the case.
Yeah, I think they're going to keep going up.
Okay,
Well, except for Truist, accepted tonight, Truist is locked at the, whatever option we choose, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And you would like a motion if the council is ready for a motion this evening. Is that correct?
Yeah, what you're in the midst of now is the public hearing, so obviously there'll be the opportunity if there's any other questions of the public or anybody in the room. The only thing under this item would be to close the public hearing. You do have action items, however, under 4C specifically, which would be to go ahead, as it is written, it would be to accept the 7.1 from Truist Bank 7-year call.
Okay.
And if you preferred the 10-year call for some reason, you could make that as part of your motion, conditioned on 10-year call, whatever. But it's item 4C where we'd be asking for that action this evening. And again, that is for the purpose of finalizing the application that's before the LGC, because the last missing piece, in addition to the 4E I requested earlier to the treasurer, the last missing piece of that will be the selection of counsel that goes before them in May.
Okay, thank you. Does the council have any other questions for Mitch?
What did you say, 7.1? What did you say?
It's up to 7.1 million.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were
Yeah,
talking
it's,
about
it's,
interest.
it's as the RFP was written, yes. I'm sorry. No, it's not the interest rate.
Do you all have any
Thanks,
other
Mitch.
questions? Yes, sir. Thank you.
I'm gonna stick around.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you.
So we make that motion. It's good.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak?
Is there anyone from the public?
Okay, I would like to close the public hearing and move on to action items. 4A, consider SU-01-24, the written decision for Mid-South CUP amendment.
Members of council will recall at our regular meeting for April, the Mid-South special use permit to amend the boundary was approved with conditions. There is a written decision in your packet reflecting the findings of fact as well as the conditions of approval.
Has council had a chance to look through that? Is there a motion?
I can't do it.
Okay.
So somebody else is taking it.
If there is a motion or a discussion that you would like to have before, either are welcome.
You got it, or you want me? So can I, in making a motion, can I move, and this is probably a Matt question, can I move to accept it, the SU 0124, with the findings of fact as set forth by the town staff and not read everything in the world? Okay. So moved. I would move that we accept case number SU 0124, incorporating in the findings of fact, decision of the board orders of special, well, I think we just want findings of fact, as set forth by the planning department, which, by the way, is lovely and does incorporate in what we said. It's really, it's a work of art. It's great.
Second.
All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Sorry, Bill, for having to have you at the meeting, although you were recused. Sorry. So Beth, you noted that, okay, thank you. All right. 4B, consider PD-01-24, the written decision for Belle Mead PDP.
Members of council may recall that at the same meeting earlier, the regular meeting in April, the council approved the addition of 40 residential units on approximately 9 acres in the existing Belle Mead community. That was phase 2 of the planned development, and in your packets, there is a copy of draft findings of fact. There were no conditions of approval for your consideration.
Thank you, Director Grieve. Is there a discussion or a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the written decision for PD-01-24 as contained in our packet.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Deborah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
second.
I didn't even hear it. Go
We'll
ahead.
go, Councilwoman Gray has seconded the motion. That's great.
All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Councilman Goodman, did you vote?
Aye.
Okay, just making sure. I just didn't hear you. Okay. All right, 4C, resolution authorizing installment financing contract for the Parkway acquisition.
Again, per the discussion, we just held it toward the end of the public hearing. This is simply the request to make a motion to authorize the installment financing contract. This specifically will be for an award of up to $17.1 million with Truist Bank, 7-year call at the interest rate presented earlier.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions or a motion?
I'll make a motion. I don't have any questions, but I'll make a motion that we do approve the authorization of the installment financing contract as previously discussed. Truist Bank up to $7.1 million with a 7-year call at the rate published in the packet and discussed in our public hearing.
Thank you. Is it,
For the 20-year term.
That's option 2 on this
Yeah,
document.
we've got to do.
the 20-year term, 7-year call, interest rate presented in the packet, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 4D, consider adoption of a memorandum of understanding with the Sand Hills Metropolitan Planning Organization. Would you like me to talk about this, or would you like to?
I was going to say however you'd like to do it.
So as you are aware, the area has grown large enough that we are now a metropolitan planning area. We formed a group of eight communities plus the county. And upon moving forward with those 8 organizations, Foxfire decided that they were unable to find a representative to serve on their behalf. So we are rewriting the memorandum of understanding, updating that Foxfire is still a part of the area map, but that the county will be representing the citizens of Foxfire. And it was at the wish of Foxfire Council. I've read it all as the representative and the chair of that board, and I'm happy with the new MOU.
And I would just offer, this is a document that you previously adopted. It's only changed from the standpoint of Foxfire is now being written out of it at their request.
I'm allowed to make motions, correct? Okay.
I make a motion that we adopt the memorandum of understanding as edited to eliminate Foxfire from the body of the original MPO.
Perfect.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Manager, would you like to add any more details on item 4E that you emailed us about?
I think I have talked myself in circles over it, but I'm happy to answer any further questions, or Tess is here certainly to do the same. Again, I've provided you the memo with the motion I'm requesting. Generally speaking, this again was the treasurer's office just asking for some explanation relative to a couple of the pieces of data that comes out of our financials. If you ask me why this came up now and not last month when we were in front of the same LGC for a state revolving loan fund, which was specific to a utility project, and both of these questions are specifics to our enterprise fund or utilities, I don't have a good answer as to why it came up now and not then, but it came up. There's legitimate responses, as you have copy of, and we simply need to have a motion that you're all in agreement that we have legitimate responses, and we'll get those turned in well ahead of the May LGC meeting.
So comment number 7 and number 8 were updated since I read the email. Do you all mind if I take a moment to read through it?
What are you looking at?
This was in the email that was emailed.
Yeah,
Email that was emailed to us.
I sent you an initial email, and unfortunately, the attachment, when
Right.
it got converted to PDF, it knocked some words out, and Brandon was good enough to catch that. So I sent out a follow-up that was the full text that we're asking for adoption of.
Are you okay if I read it?
Do you want
I'm
to,
not going to read it out loud, but I just want to look at it.
do you want to take a 5-minute break and then come back and,
Yeah.
okay, let's take a
5-minute
5-minute
break. That'll be, let's just go ahead and make it 4 o'clock, 8-minute break. Thank you. We are back to the public meeting. Item 4E, I've had a chance to read through it, and the answers didn't change from what I read earlier. It's just sentences are complete and makes more sense to me. We need signatures of everyone on these responses. So I'll pass that around after a motion. Is there a motion to approve?
Staff provided FPIC responses are both accurate and adequate, and that the finance director forward them with required signatures to the North Carolina Treasurer's Office for consideration ahead of the May meeting of the Local Government Commission.
Is there a second?
I second that.
All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. And any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Before we leave action items, I will correct my earlier statement that it is not Bill Pate's birthday.
Track my well wishes. Until the appropriate time.
Until October. My calendar is corrected. All right, moving on to item 5, council updates and discussion, a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club regarding a basketball court.
I'm going to ask Jessica to join us for this because I know she had a conversation earlier today, just as a matter of introduction, and BJ was kind enough to get the picture up there on the screen. The mayor and I met with Steve Kastner of the Boys and Girls Club a couple of weeks back, and he presented us with the idea of installing a dream court at a local park, and Cindy King was good enough to go out and take a look at the measurements that were provided by way of the picture on the screen. And we looked at Memorial Park, obviously with its immediately adjacent location to the club itself. There's some challenges there between skate park development and some tree line. Not saying it can't be done, it just turned out not to maybe be the best location. And at least heading into a meeting this morning, there seemed to be a general consensus that locating it at the pool park might in fact be the best way to go about this. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jessica to talk a little bit about what is necessary to make this happen. Ultimately, the question before the council today is whether or not we are okay with the installation of this, because essentially we are providing the land that makes that possible. And I'll also just preview maybe further discussion by saying there's probably some details yet to be worked out. This is on a schedule in part due to some upcoming national meetings of the club itself, and that should segue into some of the stuff I think Jessica has to say.
Good afternoon. I had the opportunity to meet with Steve Kastner from the Boys and Girls Club last week to confirm some of the logistics. And as Reagan said, they have an opportunity to get a grant of about $150,000 from the Nancy Lieberman Charities. And this foundation, they install these dream courts. And they have installed about between 125 and 150 of them around the United States. And it looks like there's only 1 or 2 at this point in North Carolina, and the closest would be in Charlotte. So this would be something kind of unique and special for this area. So the Boys and Girls Club approached us about it, and they are good with Pool Park. We have done some work since I met with them. Graham Purcell in our Parks and Grounds division, he actually met with a couple concrete vendors because the local club has responsibility for the site prep that is not included in the $150,000 grant. And so essentially they need to provide an at-grade hard surface, preferably concrete, that is regulation size for a high school basketball court. We have 2 existing basketball courts at Pool Park. They were resurfaced, Graham thinks, about 5 years ago, so they're in good shape. And so we were able to get quotes for just adding on to the existing courts to get them to this regulation size. We also know that there's going to be some lighting additions because right now our smaller court is lit, and once the court gets bigger, we'll want to add more lighting. And then Graham has also identified that there's some irrigation that is going to need to be relocated. So I talked to Steve this morning and I let him know, this wasn't a project that we were aware of. We had not budgeted for it. It's not the type of thing that our courts even need work, so we even had any money that was pending. And so he said that this project is important enough to them that they will fund all of the site prep work if they get approval today. And I gave him some of the estimates we got. It's going to be $20,000 to $30,000 for the concrete addition. We don't have the irrigation and lighting additions yet, and he's aware of that.
Is that just for our purposes, the lighting, or is that a dream court criteria?
It is, I don't think it's a dream court, but we do know that those courts are used at nighttime and they are already currently lit. And so, if we're going to go and add that, by the time this gets installed, it's really a $200,000 enhancement. So I think we would want to have the full court lit. So,
It would be the only full-size outdoor basketball court.
Jessica, do you know what makes it Dream Court? Is there something special about this court that's maybe a little different than other basketball courts somewhere else?
I know a few things about it. I think that's kind of the brand that the Nancy Lieberman charities use. There's some videos out there on it. It's actually kind of a panel system that you put it on top of the hard surface base, and there's a vendor in Wilmington who does this. And so they come in and put these panels, and you actually have an opportunity to kind of design your top surface. And Steve said that they would be willing to work with us so that we could have our logo on there, they could have our logo. So it would definitely be a partnership. But the overall project is to provide a safe place for kids to have a full-size basketball court, give them outdoor activities. I know that's the genesis of the Dream Court project itself. And so, so our local Boys and Girls Club is going to this national meeting in mid-May. And it sounds to me like they already have some type of assurance or pretty good assurance that they're getting this money. And so they do not want to go and accept this funding and say, we're installing it in Southern Pines. And then the towns say, yeah, no, you're not. So essentially what we're looking for today is a verbal agreement consensus from the town council that you would be okay with them installing this at Pool Park, provided that they cover the expenses for the site prep. What Reagan and I recommend is that we go ahead and do a more formal agreement with them, and we've actually talked about this because we're going to have one coming pretty soon for Skaters for More. There's some similarities to this type of project. We don't really have time to get that in place before they go to their May meeting, but we do have time to get it in place before the installation occurs. So let's see I think that covers all of the notes and the logistics that I have on my end.
So it's a great thing. I mean, I'm on board with it, so long as we do have some say in the design of it. You know, to think we don't want a thing that size having something on it that we don't have any control over. Also, just to make sure, you alluded to it, that we know it's going to happen. I may be the only one that remembers, but 5, 6, 7 years ago, another plan came forth where somebody was going to donate and do some cool painting thing to resurface that court, and then it just vanished. So I definitely don't want us to outlay any funds until we know that it's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Right now, there's no funding from the town being requested. So
There's no
it's-
ask for funding, it
That's
sounds like.
correct.
But my question is, and I don't know logistically when they meet, but the West Southern Pines group that is an advisory group, I would love to know that this had their stamp of approval, that it was something that they wanted before we move forward, because I think, I don't like the sense of us making a decision about this would go into West Southern Pines without having touched base with the community there that is supposed to advise us as to what they would like to see. So I think it sounds great. I'm concerned about, I assume they will then be on to our insurance, the whole court would be on our insurance policy, and the liabilities would be, if there was damage to the court, the liability would be something we would be dealing with. Other concerns. And if it's clear that in the contract, that the lighting and the additional lighting that goes in and the irrigation and movement would be the responsibility of the Boys and Girls Club if we enter into that partnership, so that we're not dropping a lot of unexpected cash. Those are my immediate responses to it, and I think it's a great thing.
I would, thank you, because I would suggest, relative to the liability side of it, obviously, we've already got 2 basketball courts there. I
Right.
wouldn't expect much of an impact whatsoever on our insurance with the league.
The thing that concerns me is the surface. You know, the surface in the play area and the splash pad area was torn up. If this becomes a fun thing to tear up the surface and throw it into the pool, which has been done before.
I share that concern.
I'm concerned about that, and I also want to know that the community is engaged in the decision. But I don't want to do something to hold it up.
I share the same concern about destruction of the surface, and I don't know enough about the material itself
I
to
don't
know
either.
that it works quite the same way.
Right.
Because I think it's kind of a panel type of system as opposed to the pour-in-place stuff that's in those playgrounds.
This is already a basketball court, though. It's not a new basketball
That's right.
court.
That's right. Yeah, it's really the
basically
long-term question becomes, and Jessica and I talked about it briefly today, is it's not so much, one, the life expectancy of the material being used, and 2, the cost and expectation relative to its eventual replacement.
Right.
And those
What's-
are conversations we will,
What's our upkeep responsibility? What's our
Exactly.
liability? What's the problem if there's vandalism? Is it covered by our insurance? But most importantly to me is this something that the community of West Southern Pines applauds? Is this something that they want to see happen?
And if it's not, do we move it to another location?
Right, and maybe then you circle back and look at Memorial Park, but I think that,
I think that'd be a loss.
yeah, I think it's a great idea, but I also know that there are dreams in West Southern Pines of, and I don't think this would impede it, but dreams of the slope of the land. There's a natural elevation there that sort of cries out for an amphitheater, and that all makes sense. And but I think that this would go down adjacent to the pool. Is where
This is, so if you're on Henley Street
Right.
and you're kind of approaching just kind of the entrance of Pool Park, there are 2 basketball courts right on your left.
Right.
This would be the second basketball court that is closer to the parking lot, closer to the pool. So it's the one that's further away from the
Closer to
embankment.
the covered structure.
Yes,
right.
yes.
And
It's
so-
the larger of the 2 that, it's that one
Okay.
that you can see.
So
We
it's
have more
gonna
expansion room
It's
there.
going to extend back toward the splash pad if it were to come to fruition. No, I see what you're talking about. Yeah, I got you.
Needs to
Okay.
go, it needs to go out in width as well as in length. So it would be going out, yeah.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, my only reservation is, what does the community want? And let's make sure that we check that box. So it's the one closest to me in the picture, right?
It's the one
It's
next
the
to
one
the
next to the,
shelter.
okay, next to the shelter. And Graham has staked that out, and that's going to be, we're not taking out trees, we're keeping the trees that are there, and the width is going to also be accommodated with the space that's available.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, no,
No,
join
I guess
me.
I wanted to know, so when you expand it, is it going to be expanded closer to the shelter? Or is it going to be going any other
It
direction or whatever?
needs to go in both directions.
Now, the
'cause
shelter-
regulation size is a little bit wider than what we have, and it's also a little bit longer. You know,
So
in
that
terms
shelter,
of,
yeah.
you know, whether they add, you know, an equal amount of footage on either side, or if they choose to add it all on one side, I don't know. It may depend on, you know, the actual conditions. It's going in both directions. It needs to go.
between the trees?
My understanding is it's going, it needs to go longer, yep, like that. And then I
Okay.
think there's about 4 feet on each of the other sides that would be added on.
So it means
Yeah.
the lights are going to have to be moved too. So,
Okay,
so
that's-
I would love to see it, I'd love to see it marked out. And I also don't want to stand in the way of progress if it's something everybody wants. I understand there's a May deadline maybe. So, so and this may be a question for you or you. What do we do to, I understand that it is not a decision-making body that is the conduit, community advisors from West Southern Pines, but I also understand the importance of the communication and the inclusion of that group within this decision. And I don't know logistically how we do that. Can we pop it onto our meeting in 2
We can actually,
weeks?
we can send out the information on this to the connectors. And again,
Right.
we don't have a schedule of their meetings or anything either where we could say, we'll
Right.
just send a rep over and talk about it. I know Gerald's got some contacts there, but we can get this information
That
to
would be
them.
great to have. I would love to hear comment from them at the next meeting, and I would love to table this until the next meeting. And hopefully that doesn't sabotage the Boys and Girls Club. But I'd also love to see it marked out on the property, and I'd love to know that there was a contract that was going to protect the town. I don't know, we can protect ourselves from liability. I think it's going to be, it's on our land, it's going to be covered by our insurance. But
There's
I
already
thi-
courts.
I think community engagement is going to, ownership is going to be tremendously important as far as making a success.
To hear from the council or from Jessica, if the citizens of West Southern Pines do not want it, is there another court that we can put it on? I mean, if this is an opportunity for the community of Southern Pines as a whole to have a full-size outdoor basketball court, I think it's a really nice opportunity and something that we could offer our citizens. Is there another place that we could look at to make sure that we're being cognizant and respectful of each neighborhood while also trying to provide the best services?
Yeah, I mean, we can certainly look. This came to us kind of last minute,
Yeah.
and so it's been a little bit of a challenge for us to respond to. So we're pulling all of this as quickly as we can. I mean, are there other places it can go? Of course. I wouldn't want to commit anything in this meeting today. And I had told them, Memorial Park is obviously a natural. If they were like 6 months later and the skate park had already broken ground and we knew exactly what footprint they had, that makes sense over there too. But today, we don't want to commit Memorial Park because of those reasons.
But I also
Yes,
don't want
but,
them to lose the grant opportunity because we're, not much a question. I get it.
Their timing is very short.
This is very 11th hour. I understand that, but I think,
And so,
and I certainly agree with the mayor's point about, it'd be great. It's a great asset to have.
I will say, getting the contract, I have no concerns about that at all. Reagan and I had talked about this. We literally just didn't have the ability to
Right.
get that together today, and we don't even know the final cost. I would be slightly hesitant to stake it out because what we understand is that the vendor is going to come from Wilmington and work with our team and work with the concrete vendor. And so I don't want to stake out what we think is going to be the exact dimensions and then
Right.
that vendor come and change it. And then
Right. I would be interested in, I mean, it's a regulation court. And I'd be interested in seeing what a regulation court looks like on the ground. But more importantly, I would like for the people who live near that to be able to look at what a regulation court's going to look like. And again, ownership, engagement is going to be relationships. It's going to be the key to making that a success.
That
So,
particular, that little shelter area, I
right.
don't know if y'all are familiar with it or not,
yeah.
Fellowship of Churches, which is kind of the ecumenical ministry group in the community, we use that shelter. So now, if the court goes out any further, it could be problematic. I mean, we were out there for, I don't know, an hour or whatever, and they had a worship service with various people.
It's not
So-
going to impede upon anything.
Yeah, I don't think it can
would
get a
impede,
lot closer to that
Yeah.
shelter.
I think the majority of the addition is coming out towards Henley Street. You see that kind of
Right,
green space
right.
there, would be on the left side of the screen there.
How big is that court now?
I don't know if I have the,
84.
I'm thinking it might be like a half court almost.
That's what I think too.
Maybe.
So it may go as long as the parking lot. It may come out as far as the
I'm-
parking lot does as far as.
I'm
the
just
length.
kind of envisioning it would fit between those trees. that are
Right,
there.
that's what I wonder too, right. But again, I'm not asking people to be totally wedded to where the stakes go in, but I think to look at the site, this is going to be.
Just to get an idea. And
Just
it
to
might
get an
be a matter of
idea,
taking that
yeah.
overhead and drawing
I was
the
gonna say, just
dimensions
an aerial
over it.
picture that you sketch on would be nice.
Get some crime tape, get some stakes.
Brought it to my attention, the interest was in being downtown, and I think that we didn't want to, there's a lot of more street basketball that gets played downtown, and we don't want any of that population to feel like they're getting moved in order for one court to go in.
Yeah, and that's exactly, yeah, I know Graham had told me 4 feet probably would go on either side. I think that was the feeling, that we would add 4 feet on either side. And then you said, what was it, 55?
55 by 45.
So then you'd need about another 30 feet. It would come out another 30 feet towards Henley Street.
Back toward Hanley Street, yeah.
So it's a little bigger than a half court than what's there
Yeah.
now.
Right. But it'd be great to have a full court. I mean, I agree,
Oh, yeah.
it'd be amazing to have you're going to have the high school wanting to practice there after school. I feel it coming, so.
Maybe simplify this a little bit for just
Okay.
this afternoon. Correct me if I'm off base, Jessica. I don't know that Steve clearly doesn't need a written agreement or a formal site and layout this afternoon. I think what he needs to know is if they go and they accept this grant, that we're willing to work with them to find them a site for it. And
That's
I'm
fine.
not hearing any objection to putting a court in somewhere.
Southern Pines.
This would be first choice. If for some reason the neighborhood there doesn't want it,
Right.
I think everybody's open to finding a location for it. And if
Yes.
I'm wrong, please correct me, but I think that's all he's really looking
That's,
for at
yeah,
this
he
point
really
in
wants to
time.
be able to go to this meeting next month and say, we are partnering with the town of Southern Pines to put this court in one of their parks. And
Right.
he doesn't want to, have to retract that, so.
Okay, that's fair. And then I would love to, if we can reach out though to the community connectors
It's a good call.
and make sure that everybody.
I mentioned this to an individual very involved in the community there, not a connector member, but somebody very involved in youth athletics and different things, and just kind of mentioned this, and he was pretty excited about the possibility. So there's at least some in the neighborhood that are going to be very interested in
No,
it.
I think it's an exciting possibility. I think it's great.
Well, and it's nice, we've done a lot of nice enhancements to Pool Park recently
Right.
with the deck. We actually are just right now resurfacing the pool interior. So when we open this summer, that pool's going to be nice. We just did the playground resurfacing. So there's a
right.
lot of nice investment. By the time you add it all up, we're well over probably $500,000.
And improvements there. And that's exciting. That's
It is
great. And I certainly don't want to stand in the way of improvements at the
No,
pool park,
yeah.
but I'm also really aware of the
Oh, sure.
importance of.
Yep.
So I agree with Reagan, Mr. Parsons, Manager Parsons.
Be more casual.
New rules I'm trying to abide by. I agree with your assessment that I think the main thing is everybody's on board with the idea, and I don't want to commit to a definite location unless and until folks are with us, and that pool's going to be awesome this summer.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
But it looks like everyone, we're getting like seeing head nods, at least people are interested.
So you're looking tonight for a motion to partner with, or work with Boys and Girls Club for a dream court someplace
In
in
Southern
Southern Pines.
It's an update.
I don't know that you need a motion. I do think it's important that it be on condition that the town does not bear any of the initial installation expense.
Okay. Well, I think
So-
everybody's nodded their head.
It
so.
definitely the design. That's the thing to me. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't, in the community connectors want this. I just
I
could
agree
see
with
definitely
you.
the design, like, okay, what is it gonna look like?
Right, I agree. But I also don't want to assume what the community connectors would want, so. All right. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you. I know they
Oh.
will appreciate your support.
Assistant Director, Assistant Manager Roth.
All right, item 5B, Planning Department updates. Is this coming from Director Grieve? I know it's hard to jump from basketball courts to
I know, I'm all sitting here
garbage.
thinking about basketball now.
It's a cool opportunity. Maybe something happens.
Yes, indeed. I would like to update you very briefly on planning department goings on. Current planning, we did in the first quarter of this calendar year, we did 12 pre-apps. That's a 33% increase from the same period of that last calendar year. So that is confirmation of what we all expect, that we are getting a little bit busier with pre-apps. We are also, our volume of inquiries is up about 20% roughly from the same period last year. This is indicative to us of sort of a speculative interest in development in Southern Pines, and the reason is because of those, we have not seen nearly as many entitlement reviews come through planning board and town council. So there's a lot of by right things coming in, and the Morgan Park South development, much of which is PDPs and by right, chews up a lot of interest in people calling about what's going on there, people needing adjustments based to do things in the Morgan Park South development. In terms of site plans, we did receive 10 new site plans during the same during this quarter. We have 12 under review, 5 been approved, and so we move forward with that. Another quick update about floodplain maps. Moore County is going to be updating floodplain maps as a project that's been underway. The original, I learned today, the original scoping meeting for this project was June of 2009. And I thought that was funny that the scoping meeting for this project went back to 2009. And what this is, very briefly, is that FEMA, in working with North Carolina, which is a partnering state, adopts flood insurance rate maps that set the insurance rate for properties that are within an identified floodplain. It's a risk management tool. And those floodplain maps, the original ones, were based on USGS topo maps with a 20-foot contour interval. They were relatively imprecise, but now much of North Carolina has been restudied with much better data, such as LIDAR data, to get far more precise. So whereas before there would just be a bend in the river, now there's actually little dots where you can locate where a muskrat has a carve out in the side of the river. It's just much more precise. Southern Pines has the privilege of not having a whole lot of floodplain in it because it's at the top of the watershed. It's a major watershed break, and there's drainages that go in 3 different directions from Southern Pines. We don't have a lot of floodplain, but we do have some. And so the preliminary maps that came out showed just a little bit of adjustment to some of the floodplains, and so we've been keeping track of this project. Today we had a meeting showing some of the preliminary maps. The preliminary maps will be officially released for comment and for question. There will be a 90-day period. We are on top of it. Like I said, in total, there are 5 properties. There are 5 properties where they are going into the floodplain, 2 where they are coming out of the floodplain. And this is remarkable to me because I've worked in jurisdictions where you had thousands going in or coming out. So 5 is fantastic. We plan to literally do outreach with those 5 properties individually, let them know what's going on, let them know their options. But overall, those 5 may be disappointed because their lender, if they have a federally backed mortgage, may in fact require them to now carry flood insurance, and flood insurance is increasingly expensive. So those 5 properties may be very disappointed. The 2 that are going out will be thrilled to death. You will not likely hear from them. But the 5 that are going in, they may have the right. FEMA has this way of, and the state have this way of saying, talk to your local jurisdiction about protesting or about coming up with new data. If they feel the maps are in error, they say something like, hey, when the hurricane came through, my property didn't flood, so this can't be right. It's up to the local jurisdiction to restudy the area at significant expense. And my professional judgment on that is that that is not appropriate because of the expense involved. So I'm just giving you a heads up on this. But these 5 properties, yeah, so that's what's going on with floodplain maps. We will continue to watch that. We will continue to participate, but it is a relatively low-level concern overall. It's not a low-level concern to those 5 property owners, but from a community-wide point of view, it's a relatively low-level concern. We also have some board vacancies. There are 3 vacancies presently on the Historic District Commission. It's a 7-member commission. There are 2 vacancies presently. We have 5. It's a 7-member commission, and we have 3 applicants for those positions. You recall you were forwarded Talmadge Shepard, Christopher Kendall, and Carl Ecker. Under North Carolina General Statute, a majority of the board should have an interest in the topic, should have some, there's a term for it that I can't recall right now, but some general experience or knowledge or interest in the topic. It doesn't have to be an academic or professional interest, but it has to be some knowledge. Talmadge Shepard, he wants to be on the Historic District Commission. He does not appear to have anything, according to his application, he does not appear to have what I refer to as 160D 303 background, but he does have experience in real estate. Carl Ecker does appear to have 160D 303 background, so he looks like a good fit for the HDC. And then Christopher Kendall, he indicated in his application that he would like to, based on what he said, the reasons he wanted to get involved in local government, it sounded to me like actually he'd be a better fit to be appointed to BPAC because he has concerns with some crosswalks and some multimodal safety issues. So my recommendation was that Christopher Kendall be appointed to BPAC and that Talmadge Shepard and Carl Ecker be considered for HDC. After that, they're political appointments, and I don't know them as individuals, so I can't say much more.
I'll just say, I mean, I agree with that. I think it's great. Talmadge was one of the ones that did apply for the council seat appointment. I had great conversations with him and know that he's definitely want to get involved. So I think he'd be good on that board.
I'm sorry. How many vacancies do we have on Board of Adjustments? Because Talmadge may be a perfect fit for that.
I feel like Board of Adjustments is almost a more professional role, that someone needs to understand either the planning board or the town council process before we put them on Board of Adjustments to,
It rarely meets.
yeah.
Right.
If
It
somebody's
rarely
looking
means-
to jump in with 2 feet, they're going to be disappointed if they're.
They're going to be
Okay.
reviewing decisions that I'm not sure they fully
The gentleman
understand.
recently appointed to Board of Adjustment. We haven't met yet, and I think he's chomping at the bit to get going on it.
Okay, well, Talmadge was lovely to interview and wanted to be involved, and I don't want to do anything to sabotage that, but,
And then I do have one more comment, actually, is that we learned this last week that John Earp will be selling his house in Southern Pines and moving to Charleston for a little while because they have another house in Charleston. So he will not be qualified to be on the planning board anymore. So May is his final meeting. So there will now be a planning board vacancy as well. We don't have any applications for that, but sometimes I know planning board is of interest to members of council to people approach you and say, hey, what about planning board? So we will
In
have.
town?
Pardon?
He's in town?
Yes, John's is an in-town, yep.
Are there any other applicants for BPAC?
No,
No?
the planning does not normally deal with BPAC. Usually that's Parks and Recreation. However, we're more than happy to help with, if there's an interest by the council to make an appointment to BPAC. BPAC is also, you'll remember in the comp plan, there's some goals about transitioning the BPAC to a slightly different mission, a slightly different objective based on the creation of the MPO. And once the MPO gets settled in and their work is understood in terms of the distinction between multimodal transportation, et cetera, there may be an opportunity to rebrand that group. But an appointment to it, we have one, we're happy to tee that up for you and bring it to your next agenda if you so choose. That's something we can help with.
Thank you.
so I agree with your recommendations, though.
I agree as well. Did you have a question? You started to say something.
Oh, no, that's what it was.
Okay,
Just-
okay.
Great. You would just put those appointments on the agenda meeting, or the agenda for the next meeting? Okay.
Yes, sir. With the direction I've got here, that's what we'll do. We'll tee up 2 for HDC and 1 for BPAC.
Okay.
What's coming next month? You have a zoning text amendment coming to you that came out of planning board with a recommendation for approval. It is to reduce the distance of cell towers from a minimum of 1,000 feet to 800 feet. The applicant is Tower Co. LLC, who, not surprisingly, would like to put a 155-foot tower about 800 feet from the nearest residential zoning district. So that would be a text amendment on their behalf. Staff is recommending approval. The planning board recommended approval. The distance of 1,000 feet from a residential zone was not a magic number for any particular reason. It was and actually a lot of jurisdictions simply go by the height of the tower. That's how far from a residential zone it has to be. So 800 feet is still very reasonable. So at least that was staff's take on it, but that's coming at you next month. And I'll put those Historic District Commission appointments on there as well.
And we'll have more information on the tower location, all that stuff next month.
Yeah, in this case, it's a text amendment, so it's actually, I feel like I have a spider like spinning a web on me while I'm talking. It's like, all right. I don't think I do, but it feels like it for some reason.
So because it's a text amendment, do we not get the details of where it's going?
Being a text amendment, it could go
Anywhere?
anywhere 800 feet away. So.
Okay.
Yeah, the text amendment will be applicable to everywhere, but the proposed tower is actually behind the veterinarian's office north of the intersection of NC 22 and Wayner Road. It's behind the veterinary office. It's a long linear property, goes straight back from their office.
It's definitely an area, whether that's the right parcel or not, it is an area that could use some additional coverage of a tower.
I just have a random question. Sorry, totally not to take it off guard, but is that tower behind the Pinecrest baseball field not a cell tower? Because it's way closer than 800 feet to residential.
It may predate that standard.
Pinecrest
Okay.
baseball field is not a residential area.
No, but it's across the street is.
Yeah, but the
It might
tower existed
predate.
before the residential area, I think, yeah.
Thanks.
The cell tower standards, the date of adoption, that would require some research, but that's certainly a possibility, is that standard predates that. I have two additional things I wanted to share with the town council. One is that you'll recall we have the project for character districts. We've been moving forward with that. The consultant's been doing a great job. That project has taken a little bit of a twist in that originally there were going to be 3 character districts, and the 3 that the consultant was working on were West Southern Pines, downtown, and downtown adjacent. And the consultant is moving forward with the downtown and the West Southern Pines. But the downtown adjacent has taken a slightly different turn, because the feedback that was received constantly during all the meetings was that downtown adjacent, which is the area, the triangle, the old US 1 triangle, which we found platting documents that refer to that as Pine Dean. So we're sort of, our shorthand for that project is the Pine Dean area. That area may be better served by having guidelines rather than strict zoning lockdown, because the flexibility that a lot of people wanted to see in that area, flexibility for design, flexibility, it wasn't as important to lock that down with a 80% brick downtown Southern Pines look. It was more, let's make it feasible to redevelop, let's make it more flexible, let's make people be able to come in with a conditional zoning district and kind of flex some creative muscle. So that is actually going to be pivoted from a zoning overlay to some additional details in the comprehensive plan, which then a conditional zoning district or a rezoning has to demonstrate consistency with the comprehensive plan, and it can be used as guidelines rather than hard and fast rules. So that is a good example of a project going along and you're getting to a point where it's just not working because it's running into too many obstacles based on the feedback you're getting, and then pivoting and saying, wait a minute, we could achieve the same thing if it was in the comp plan. Rezonings had to be consistent with the comp plan, and now there's design flexibility. So it's a slight change, and we're going to, and that's underway. I'll keep you posted on that, but I wanted to let you know about that progress. And finally, I wanted to show you something really neat that we're doing in the office, and that is that I wanted to show, here we go. What we are doing now is when we receive inquiries, we go into a map of Southern Pines, and we, one second. When we review a project, when we do a pre-application meeting, when we receive an inquiry and we do a whole bunch of research and give them information back, what we do is we go in and we use this site right here to create a point like this. You can see this is an existing point from a previous inquiry. We go in like this, we make a point, gives us a latitude and longitude, we put in the first and last name of the caller, we put in all of our notes. Our notes used to be kept in many different places. We're now putting these notes into the GIS, right? We can even drop in files. So if we look up a plat for that property, if we have a copy of a zoning map from many years ago that's applicable to this property, we'll put it in there. Then when you use the normal GIS site, we then have access. So when we have new staff come on board, when we have, this is not available to the public, but we're thinking we could beta test this with making it available to the public. But for right now, it's an in-house resource. So what you'll actually do is when we go to look up somebody's zoning, and we can turn on this layer, it's called site information. And now what we can do is we can click on this, and it shows us this is the Montessori school, when we talked with them, what the nature of the discussion was, and we can keep better track of administrative determinations, interpretations, and we can give much more consistent information to people much more frequently. So this is going to be a big help. We are in the process of using it and bringing it into the fold. We get complaints. We can do all kinds of stuff with this. The reason is we find that these types of inquiries, it's easy to associate them with the property, but it's much harder to associate them with a planner who comes and goes, who was only here for 2 years, and their notes are lost to history. So we're going to be tracking these this way in-house.
Is the Montessori school dot in the wrong place?
This is actually a different inquiry about, yeah.
Okay. I was like, that's
So this is some buyers who wanted to possibly do something related to, I could read it, but I don't know what this one is. Yeah.
I was like, of all the weird things to bring up.
Yeah.
I'll just,
We have a lot to go on here, but it's a great start. And
I like that for your office.
Oh, man.
I don't know that you would ever want that to go anyway to public because your people's ideas of potential private business and things could be in there and they may not want people to see their,
And if it's just an idea, it's not
Yeah.
something there's potentially no application, you could start a lot of arguments on Nextdoor.
but for y'all, it's great. That's good.
I would agree with that 100%. I just because we get a lot of speculative inquiries and that has an effect on negotiations out there, and it is all public information and we share it if we have a public information request, of course, and we tell people that. They say, hey, can I talk to you in private? I said, not really, to be honest with you. I'm not going to shout. What I tell people is I'm not going to shout it from the rooftop, but if someone asks me a point blank, did I speak with you on this date? I'm going to say yes. So, and that's all from planning.
Very good. Thank you. All right, draft budget updates.
So you've got a memo in your packet with a new available fund balance. I think Tess and I captured everything coming out of the council retreat. Biggest changes of the 7 listed obviously involve the removal of the detective request and all of the associated cost with that, in addition to the increase in the waste fee as discussed by the council, and then the removal of the 2 pennies that were originally in the draft budget. So, but again, outlined all 7 of the changes there, new available fund balance of $476,938. And then please note the final piece below that little Excel spreadsheet excerpt, in that the utility truck, which was kind of the last item we discussed for the day and whether to leave it or not leave it, James went back, we took a look at the history on that, had some internal conversation, and at this point, we are removing that request from the enterprise fund budget. If it turns out that the truck suddenly goes downhill or something along those lines, we'll be back in front of you for a budget amendment and an explanation as to what's going on with it. But for the time being, we have removed that from the enterprise budget. And that's all I have on that, unless there's additional questions or conversation from the council.
What was the incentive to remove that from the budget, the utility truck?
Really, it was sort of just a lot of conversation as we rolled toward the end of the day. There was kind of a final comment that it doesn't really affect the increase or non-increase in rates.
Right.
But as they went back and took a look at it, it really, there were still some questions around it. It is low mileage. As James stated during the meeting, it's kind of the 3rd truck. Part of the reason they wanted to get it replaced beyond it just being 10 years old and kind of on the schedule was around the truck itself compared to the other 2 they have and some preferences. But after they took a look at it, as James had said at the meeting, it was kind of a low priority, and it is something that we can always go back, and it's not a fire truck that takes 3 years to get.
Right.
If in fact we would have to go and replace it, so it's just not a high priority at this point in time, and it was determined to forego it.
Okay.
The comment at the end of the meeting that we should review it, and it came down to, well, it doesn't go into the budget, and then it was like, well, that shouldn't matter. If it's that
Right.
low mileage, we're not putting that many miles on it moving forward, and we just put a lot of money into repairing it. So
Okay.
at least see if we can get it to live a little bit longer.
And as a reminder, we will, Tess will be putting all of this finalized, updating your budget books. We will have our first budget hearing on the 2nd Tuesday, which will actually be in this room because of the special election that day. And then we'll move from there to work session and then ultimately to a final hearing in June and hopeful adoption of a budget prior to July 1.
Okay.
So.
One of the probably most important lessons that I've learned in my very brief tenure has been when we were talking about the fire trucks and the impact it had on the insurance if those were not replaced. And if that is an issue, I would love to be made aware of that in other circumstances. In regard to police vehicles, I would like for that to be a part of the presentation to the council, because I think, I don't think that's going to matter on
Yeah,
James's truck.
the
but-
fire truck is a special scenario because apparatus is a part of the insurance rating that is
Right.
received, which then impacts both commercial and residential insurance for fire and loss.
Right. And the same may be
It's
true.
hard to draw a parallel between that scenario and certainly the utility truck or even a
Yeah,
police
right,
vehicle or something.
right.
I can't offhand think of a similar instance, but if it exists, be assured that along with the request for that piece of equipment or vehicle or whatever it is, we would be pointing out those ancillary sort of benefits and risk and concerns if they exist.
That's great. That's just a personal request. I think that's a huge piece of information that you would have the expertise and we would not know that. So thank you.
So good request. All right, is there, quick council roundtable. Is everyone okay with the budget and ready to see again in
Yes.
May?
Okay with the budget. I'd love to talk about how we're doing at Whitehall with dogs off leashes and what follow-up do we need there and what do we need to do? How much do we hope that Anna puts it in the newspaper that this is an issue that we really want to ensure the safety of all of our citizens?
So we have two off-leash dog parks. We have Martin Dog Park, and then there's one up by the airport.
That is correct.
Okay,
Private one, I put it at the airport. I
okay,
think, yeah.
okay. Martin,
I think I had spoken even to Jessica after the meeting or something, and she was telling me there's two other dog parks. Could it possibly be that maybe those dog parks are just not inviting enough, and people would prefer to? I mean, I don't have a dog, y'all. I'm
Right.
usually not a dog person, although there's a couple of dogs that I'm very fond of. But
She's not a dog.
no, I'm sorry. I just me and the kids. I don't know what these other dog parks look like. I guess that's my point. So why is it that people are not going there?
Oh, I think Whitehall's just beautiful.
Actually, I mean, I wouldn't suggest that people aren't going to the dog park. It is actually a very heavily utilized
Yeah,
facility. I
yeah.
think it probably in some instances just comes down to convenience
Right.
and what's
Well,
closer.
and
Yeah, but it's not that the dog park is not being used. Don't.
Right,
yeah.
and Whitehall feeds right into the reservoir and that wonderful walk around the water, and I think it's location,
But
but
it is, I know you had noted it was private, and I don't know what the fee schedule is or anything of that nature, but there is one in the general, I'll call it the general vicinity, the side of town, however you want to word it, up near Whitehall. And in fact,
You're going
I
to
know
the
BJ has received
BJ's taking you to the
some
doctors.
inquiries about future veterinarian hospital and some different things on the site too. So it's about to probably expand and even be more well-known. But to update you, Ann, I'm not sure that anything terribly significant has changed. There continue to be people very adamant on both sides of the issue, but dogs continue to be required to be on leash at Whitehall. And that is the plan, at least in the short term. I also wanted to point out to council, I know there was a letter to the editor sort of complaining about new trails at Whitehall and how terrible they were. And it confused me a little bit, but let me just clarify for the record. The town has not built new trails at Whitehall. What I think that individual has come across is some trails that were cut in by the Forestry Service for the controlled burns that took place out there. Obviously, they don't go back and, move the pine straw around and
right.
get rid of them. So people have probably found them and thought, oh, new trail, I'm going to
So
walk
it's a
it.
burn line,
But
too.
it's a
Yeah,
burn line. It was
Right.
done by the Forestry Service. It was not done with the intent that those sort of be new town-adopted permanent trails or anything. So
Right.
just as a means of clarification, while they are technically trails and people are, I suppose, free to walk on them, please recognize they're not official trails of the town. You won't find them on a Greenway map, and they're not being maintained on a daily basis. So that was, I think, the confusion surrounding some of that letter.
Okay.
I wanted to thank the council and staff of this great town for your support for that occasion that we had in West Southern Pines by the Men's and Women's Fellowship Club, honoring me for being first Black woman sitting on town council. Everybody wasn't there, but I think my mayor. Mayor came, and everybody else told me that why they couldn't come. But I felt your support and felt your love, and I appreciate it. So it was a great time, and it's done. Back to work.
I don't want to take any attention away from our new Councilwoman Gray. Not new anymore. It was a wonderful event, but there were several great recognitions for citizens of Southern Pines. So it was a proud moment for all of the town to have so many people recognized for their contributions to the community as a whole. I'm glad I could be there. Do you have any updates?
Sure. I will give a shout out to Cindy King. I think this is her last week, and she's done a great job as our Parks and Rec director. So I appreciate her service, and I know y'all don't have a replacement yet. Is that correct? Okay, but she's left a good blueprint and has done a great job. So thanks, Cindy.
No.
Birthday.
You can have 2 a year now. I will quickly, yeah, you might get some. I'll quickly add, Councilman Goodman and I had the opportunity as really from the town of Southern Pines perspective to go visit with the DOT in Raleigh 2 weeks ago. Meet with one of the directors regarding the commuter train. The update on that rail project is that a lot of the money and the funding is for things that are north of Raleigh right now. So they have not forgotten about us. They understand that we are interested and it will eventually be a part. I think Hamlet is now interested in adding on to that commuter rail. Reagan Parsons said that he met with Amtrak, that there's some interest from South Carolina, that it extends even further. But because the funding is for things that are north of Raleigh, we're just not going to see it anytime in the near future. That conversation in Raleigh quickly moved to sort of what are some things that we can do to prepare or take advantage of the opportunities that, you know, if rail does come to Southern Pines, the commuter rail, things that we can do now that would be beneficial now for our citizens. And looking into public transit was an option, and I think it's something that's probably going to be handled at the MPO level, but looking at some really neat newer public transit, those like last mile solutions that we talked about last March, I think, and that maybe there's a feasibility study. Ideally, that's more than just Southern Pines gets involved, but we are working on it. And I know it's really minimal updates, but just to let you guys know.
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Sarah, Mr. Grieve, I believe that's her first name, the consultant that's been working on the character districts. I came to that meeting, and she just did a wonderful job at, really giving a good feel of what each of those particular districts are going to really kind of look like, and where the focus was in terms of the ambience and everything else. And I was impressed. I was very impressed. And
Sarah Sinatra. Yeah,
Sinatra,
with
yes,
Inspire
thank you.
placemaking.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing that carry through further down the road. It's really good, so.
Thank you.
And shout out to Nedra Norton shout out to Nedra Norton for showing up also for
She did,
that.
yeah, your event.
Yeah, thank you.
It was good to see her there. Do you have anything else?
Mayor, one last item.
Yes.
Remember that Catherine Clodfelter will be sitting with you as the interim city attorney.
And we expect that when you are not here, you'll be out having a much better time on vacation without us.
I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Our next meeting is going to be May 14th. Again, because of the special election, it is going to be here in this location, 6 p.m., second Tuesday of May. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Look at that.
Mitch.
Yes, ma'am.